One might argue that if the king's horse had possessed better manners, none of it would ever have happened. But a horse learns his manners from the men who keep him, and the men who kept this one answered to the king. So really, if a person followed it back far enough, the whole business was His Majesty's fault, all of it, every part. The 12th presentation lasted 4 minutes, which was 2 minutes longer than the 11th. Marin watched it from the mouth of the feed passage with a barrow of soiled straw, because that was where a housemaid stood when the court came down to the covered ring, and because somebody had to be ready to make the yard respectable again afterwards. She had watched all 12. She had a favorite, which she would not have admitted under torture, and it was the one crossing the frozen sand, now in pale blue wool, chin up, like a woman going to a hanging she intended to win. Lady Sylvain Arctic got closer than any of them. She got a hand within a foot of the stallion's cheek, then Hollow swung his quarters, took her sleeve in his teeth, and put her into the water trough. The court made the noise the court always made. It was not quite laughter, and it was not quite horror, and it was the sound well-fed people make when somebody else's dignity comes apart, and they are glad it was not theirs. The Dowager Lady Ilva said something crisp about the hour. The houses began to move off toward the hall. Lady Sylvain climbed out of the trough by herself, refused 2 hands, and walked out through the middle of them with the water running off her hem. "Clear it," said the under-steward, without looking at Marin, "before the ceremonial party comes through." So she took her barrow into the ring, and everybody left, and she was alone, with the last storm-bred stallion in the world. He was shaking. That was the thing nobody up in the hall would ever know. The whole of the Ridgelands would tell the story of the king's horse and the trough by the end of the week, and not one of them would know that when the sand emptied, the animal stood with his head down and his flanks going like a bellows, and shook from the shoulder to the hock. "I know," Marin said. He turned his head at her voice, and his ears came forward, and he walked the length of the ring and put his muzzle against her shoulder and stood there breathing. He had done it since she was 11. It was not a miracle. She had fed him at night, in the bad winter, and horses keep a ledger, and everyone else had forgotten she was ever anything but a woman with a mop. 4 minutes, she told him. You are getting slower. She raked the sand around him because he did not care to be moved. She talked while she worked, which she did with animals, and with nobody else, and having had a great deal of time to think, and no one at all to say it to, she said it now. It is not you. You know that somebody ought to say it out loud in this hold once, so I am saying it. There is nothing wrong with you that was not done to you. She dragged the rake through. A man like that gets given the finest animal ever bred in these mountains, and he cannot be troubled to learn what it wants, so it goes wrong. And when it goes wrong, he stands up there, with a cup in his hand, and calls it fate. That is what they are all calling it, fate, as though the beast came out of his mother spoiled. She straightened. He breaks a thing by neglect, and then names it a mystery. That is the whole of him, that is the whole of every one of them. It would take one honest afternoon, and he has not spent one honest afternoon on anything in 9 years. 9.5, said a voice behind her. Marin turned around. The king of Blackmere Hold was sitting on the mounting block at the dark end of the ring, with his elbows on his knees. He had a cup in one hand. He had not, she realized with a lurch, that went all the way to her heels, gone up to the hall with the rest of them at all. She should have gone down on one knee. She got as far as the thought. "Do not stop," said Casimir Vale. "You are being very fluent, Your Majesty. You have been standing in that passage for all 12 of them. I have been sitting on this block for all 12 of them. I have wondered for some weeks what you were thinking about it, and now I know, and I find I would like the rest." He stood. He came down the ring, unhurried, and the closer he got, the less of the ease she believed. "Say it again to my face." She thought about the barrow, and the west corridor, and the 12 years she had spent keeping her head down so successfully that 400 people could look at her and see furniture. She was so tired. "There is nothing wrong with your horse," Marin said. "That was not done to him by somebody who had the keeping of him, and you have had the keeping of him for 9.5 years, and you have never once asked him a question." Casimir stopped a length short of her. Nobody had ever told her that his eyes were that light. "It was not on the coins. And you could do better," he said. "Anyone could do better. A boy of 9 could do better. That is not what I asked." "Yes," her chin came up. "I could do better." "Then say so. Where it counts." He was smiling, and there was something underneath the smile that was not amusement at all. 12 houses have put a daughter in front of that animal. Every one of them has been made a fool of in front of the kingdom. You have opinions about my horse, and my neglect, and my 9.5 years, and you have delivered them to a stall door, because it was safe. Marin heard herself before she had any say in it. "Then put me in the line," she said, "if you have got the nerve." The wind came down the valley, and went through the ring and out the other side. "Done," said the king. And there is no unsaying it. She opened her mouth. Behind her, at the top of the ramp, the ceremonial party came through on their way to the hall. The dowager first, with 3 houses behind her, and Master Garofel at her shoulder, with the tally book under his arm. And Hollow, last of the storm-bred, who had put a noblewoman in a trough 4 minutes ago in front of the entire court, walked across the sand in full view of every one of them, and lowered his head, and rested it on the shoulder of the housemaid. Nobody in the party made a sound. Marin stood absolutely still under the weight of him, and thought, with great clarity, that she had just made the single worst mistake of her life. The trouble with a mistake of that size is that it does not feel like one in the morning. It feels like a thing you dreamed and got wrong in the remembering. Marin woke at the 4th bell out of habit, in the box room off the linen store. She had slept in for 6 years, and lay there working through the previous evening for the part that had frightened her and could not find it. She had said some things. The king had said some things. She was fairly sure, been rude. So she got up and put on her apron, and went down to the kitchens for bread, and understood within 4 steps of the door that something had gone very badly wrong. The kitchens held a dozen people. Every one of them stopped. "Ah," said Petra, from the long table. "Right, everybody out." "We are working," said the pastryman. "Work somewhere else, or I will tell her myself, in front of you. And then you will have to look at her face and you will feel like a dog about it for a week." Petra had a way of saying things that made arguing seem exhausting. They went. She pushed a stool out with her foot. "Sit down, Petra. Sit down, Marin." Marin sat down. "What do you remember?" Petra said. "All of it. There is nothing wrong with my memory." She heard her own voice go thin. "I raked the ring. The king was there. I said things about him I should not have said in the open air, and he took it better than he should have." She stopped. "Petra." "What?" Petra put both hands flat on the table. "Odo has been up since the 2nd bell," she said. "He has told it 6 times, and it has not changed once, which for Odo is a miracle in itself." The dowager and 3 houses came down the ramp and saw the king's horse put his head on your shoulder. And there is a thing being said all through this hold, since about midnight, and it is not being said as a joke, and I need you to hear it from me. Sitting down, say it. They are calling it the omen. Petra's jaw was tight. The old right. That the storm-bred choose the queen, and the choosing cannot be appealed. Nobody has believed it in 200 years. They believe it this morning. Marin laughed. It came out of her sideways. "He is a horse," she said. "He is a frightened horse, who knows the smell of the person who fed him in a bad winter. I know that, you know that. There are 400 people upstairs who spent all autumn watching the best-born women in the Ridgelands get bitten and thrown and dumped, and now they have a story with an ending, and you will not get it back off them." Petra took a breath. "That is not the worst of it. Odo is in the hayloft, which he should not have been. He says, you told the king to put you in the line." The kitchen went very quiet. "I did say that," Marin said, "and he said done." "He said," there is no unsaying it. Her hands had gone cold around the bread. She had not eaten. It was talk. He was making a point about people who complain safely, and I was making a point about him. It was two people scoring off one another. In an empty ring. Was it? Said Petra. Garrow found her an hour later in the tack room, which she had gone to because it was the only room in the hold that had never once made her feel like a guest. He came in fast, with his coat still on, and he was angrier than she had seen him in 12 years. "Sit down," he said. "No, do not sit down. Look at me." He took her by both shoulders. "Has he touched you?" "What? Has he touched you? Has he spoken to you, alone? Has he put anything in writing?" His hands were shaking. "Marin girl, listen to me. There is nothing funny happening here. A man of that house does not take a fancy to a maid. He takes a use out of one. He is being pressed by 9 noble families to marry, and he has just found a way to make them all wait while he decides which of them to ruin. And you are the way. You are the excuse. And when he has finished with the excuse, he will set it down. He is his father's son, and I knew his father." Garrow let go of her. He turned away and stood with his hand over his mouth. For a moment. "I am sorry. I am not angry with you. I have never once in your life been angry with you." He turned back. "I will go up. I will speak to the dowager. I will speak to him if I have to, and I will have it undone by tonight. You will keep your head down and your mouth shut, and you will let me handle it. That is what I am for. Say it. That is what you are for," Marin said. He went. She stood in the tack room among the smell of oil and leather, and heard him go up the yard stair at a pace that would have hurt a younger man, and she felt about 6 years old, and safe, and small, and she did not examine any of the 3. The horn went at noon. It was not a horn they used often. It was the announcement horn, the one for treaties and deaths, and by the time Marin got up to the passage behind the great hall, it had been sounding long enough to empty the whole lower yard. She got in at the back, behind the pages, with Petra's hand shut around her wrist. The herald had a roll of paper. The Dowager Lady Ilva stood on the dais, with her face arranged into something perfectly, murderously blank. Casimir Vale sat in the chair beside her with a cup he was not drinking from, and he was looking at the back of the hall, and Marin understood with absolute certainty that he had found her in the crowd before the herald had drawn breath. By the king's word the herald read, and by the old right of the hold, the line of presentation is not closed. 400 people made no sound at all. There will be a 13th, and then he read her name. She got 6 steps into the hall before Garrow reached her, and 40 into the corridor beyond it, before she stopped being able to hear her own name being said, behind her by strangers. The dowager received them in the small council room. She did not sit down, which meant nobody could. "Withdraw it," Garrow said, "before this reaches the coast. The Ardeks have 100 spears at Cairn Marrow, and they have just watched their daughter fished out of a trough and replaced by a maid. I am aware of the Ardeks, having answered 4 of their letters this morning." The dowager's eyes went to Marin. "Do you wish it withdrawn?" "Yes, my lady." "Then we are agreed. All 3 of us, which is a novelty in this hold." "Your Majesty, it appears to be unanimous." Casimir was at the window with his back to the room. He had been there since they came in. "No," he said. "Sire, I said it in front of 4 houses, and a herald has read it in the hall. If I take it back today, then every one of those 12 women was humiliated for a whim, and the whole kingdom will know I am a man who says things and then does not mean them." He turned around, "which I am. But I should prefer they went on not being sure." "That is not a reason," said Garrow. "It is a very good reason. It is simply not a flattering one." Casimir came away from the window. "Master Fell, you have said your piece, and I am not going to punish you for any part of it. Now I would like a moment with the 13th. Nobody moved. "Garrow," Marin said quietly, "it is all right." He did it slowly, and at the door he stopped and looked back at her. the way a man looks at a horse he is leaving in a burning barn. And then the door shut, and it was the two of them and the dowager, who had made herself into a piece of furniture by the fire, and was plainly not going anywhere. "You have gone white," Casimir observed. "You have made me 13th in a line of women who are being married for their father's spears. Your Majesty, I have no father and no spears. I have a bucket, yes." He looked at her for a moment. "You said there was nothing wrong with my horse that was not done to him by somebody who had the keeping of him." "I did. Nobody has said anything like that to me in 9 years. I found I wanted to hear the rest of it, and I discovered at some point last night that the only certain way to make a person in this hold go on speaking to me honestly was to make it impossible for them to be dismissed." He spread his hands. "So I made it impossible. That is the whole of my reasoning, and I am aware it will not survive contact with a lawyer. It was not a lie." She was fairly sure of that, and it took her a quarter of an hour on the yard stair to work out what was wrong with it. It was not a lie. It was simply not the size of the truth. A man does not upend 9 noble houses because a maid was interesting about a horse, and Marin, who had spent her life reading the difference between what an animal shows you and what it is doing, went down knowing she had been handed a reason that fitted the facts and explained nothing. The arrow came at the 4th bell that afternoon. She was in the yard. The king was crossing it with 2 men from the treasury, and he turned to say something, and there was a sound like a door slammed in another building, and a hand's breadth of grey fletching stood out of the gate-post at the height of his throat. The yard went mad. Guards came out in a wave, somebody shouting for the gate to be shut, and Marin was flat against the wall of the feed passage with her heart in her ears. Casimir Vale stood in the middle of it. He looked at the arrow, worked the shaft out of the wood, turned it over, and said something to the treasury man that made the treasury man laugh. He laughed in the yard, with the guards still running. Marin watched him do it, and thought quite clearly that a man does not laugh at that, unless he has already had time to get used to it. It was full dark when she came off the last of her floors, and Lady Sylvain Ardec was standing in the passage outside the linen room. She should not have been there. The Ardecs had ridden out at noon. She was in a traveling cloak, with her hair wet from the weather, and she had plainly been standing in that passage for some time. "I have 4 minutes," she said. "My father thinks I am with the horses. My lady do not." Sylvain came off the wall. "I have said this to 2 people, and they both looked at me exactly as you are looking at me now, so I shall say it quickly, and leave, and you may do as you like with it. When I walked at that animal, he was not wild. I ride. I have ridden since I was 4. That horse was hurt, and he was frightened of something specific. And it was not me. He is frightened of everyone. He is not frightened of you." Sylvain's mouth twisted. "I have been thinking about very little else for a week. 12 of us. 12. In an order somebody chose, and every one of us shown to a hurt animal in front of the whole kingdom, and now the whole kingdom believes he cannot marry any of us because the horse will not have us." She pulled her hood up. "Nobody is asking who set the order. I would very much like somebody to ask." She was 3 steps down the passage before Marin found her voice. "My lady, why bring it to me?" Lady Sylvain Ardec looked back over her shoulder. "Because you were 13th, she said, "and whoever arranged the other 12 did not arrange you. So, either you are the only accident in this, or you are the only one of us who was ever meant to be there at all." 3 days after the herald had read her name aloud, nobody had thought to release Marin from her duties, so she was on her knees in the west corridor, with a bucket and a stiff brush, when Odo came round the corner so fast he took it on one shoulder. "He wants you," the boy gasped. "In the stable, now," he said. "Now twice." She sat back on her heels. "Who does? Who do you think?" "Marin. He is standing in our stable, in the muck, in his own boots." She wrung out the brush, and she took her time about it, because her hands had started to shake, and she did not care to walk into a stable with shaking hands. He was in the muck, in his own boots, exactly as promised. Casimir Vale, ninth of his name, Alpha of the Ridgelands, leaned against the post of the third stall, with his coat undone, looking at a horse who was looking back at him with an expression of frank and settled loathing. "He does that," Marin said from the doorway. "He has been doing it for some time." The king did not turn. "I have a theory. He is waiting for me to make the first mistake so he can enjoy it properly." Now he did turn, and the whole easy warmth of him arrived at once, like a lamp being uncovered. "Good afternoon. You have a bucket." "I was working." "Yes." His glance went to the water, darkening her cuffs, and something moved behind his eyes and was gone before she could name it. "I am told you were a stable girl here until the year you turned 16. I was. And then you were not." "And then I was not," she agreed, and did not explain, because the explanation belonged to Garrow Fell, and she had never, in 12 years, found a way to tell it that did not sound like a complaint. Casimir let the silence sit. He was good at that, and it was the first thing about him she genuinely disliked, because a man who is good at silence is a man who knows what silence is. "Teach me my horse," he said. Marin laughed. It came out before she could stop it. One flat, unhappy note, and she watched it land on him and go nowhere. "Your Majesty, I clean floors. You were the last person in this kingdom. That animal did not try to kill. I have consulted 4 horsemen, 2 physicians, and a woman from the northern valleys, who charged me a great deal to tell me he was cursed." He pushed off the post. "I have run out of experts. I should like to try somebody who knows something. Master Fell knows something. Master Fell has kept that line alive for 19 years. Master Fell tells me the animal is soured and should be put down before he takes a hand off somebody." Casimir said it lightly. "You are welcome to agree with him. I am asking you not to." There it was laid on the straw between them. Marin looked at the stallion. Hollow had his head over the door now, ears half back, a big rough dark thing with a white sock on the near hind and a scar under his jaw that nobody had ever explained to her. The horses that would carry a wolf without going mad about it had won 3 wars for this hold and made it rich, and there was one stallion of them left alive, and he was standing in a stall wanting to bite somebody. "He is not soured," she said. "Then what is he?" Frightened, she set the bucket down. "And nobody has told him he is allowed to be." She took them out to the covered ring because she did not want the audience of the yard, and because she wanted the king cold and standing, rather than warm and leaning. "Watch. I am going to do it wrong first, so you can see it." She walked at the horse the way the whole world walks at horses, straight in, shoulders square, hand up, the bearing of a person going to collect a thing that belongs to them. Hollow's ears went flat, and he swung to face her, with his teeth showing, and Casimir moved, and she put her hand out behind her, without looking. "He was going to bite you. He was going to tell me to stop. There is a difference, and it is the entire lesson." She turned side on. She dropped her eyes to the sand. She walked a curve, not a line, wide and unhurried, the walk of a person going somewhere else who happens to be passing, and stopped a full length short and let out a long breath, and waited. The wind came down the valley. The horse breathed. Then the flat ears came up, by a degree, and then another, and the big dark head came down, and Hollow took one step, and set his muzzle very lightly against her shoulder and stood. Behind her, the king of Blackmere Hold said nothing at all. "Now you," Marin said. "I have been told he will not. You have been told a great many things. Come here." He came, and stood where she put him, at the shoulder, side on, eyes down, and she thought with some irritation that he learned faster than anyone she had ever taught. "Now what? Now ask him." Casimir turned his head. "Anything. It does not matter." She folded her arms against the cold. "You have been telling that animal what to do since you were 19. Every man who has come near him has told him what to do. Ask him something, and wait for the answer. And do not decide in advance what the answer is going to be. She expected him to laugh. She had built a whole small wall inside herself for the laughing. She watched him look at the horse, and watched the charm go out of his face the way a lamp is turned down. And what was left underneath was somebody tired and very careful. "May I touch you?" said the king, to a horse in a frozen ring, with nobody watching but a housemaid. And he waited. Hollow turned his head and put his ear forward. He breathed out hard, a great steaming rush of it into the cold, and leaned across the space between them, and set his forehead against Casimir Vale's chest, and left it there. Marin discovered she had a hand over her own mouth, and took it down. "Well," said the king. His voice had gone strange. "That is a great deal easier than the woman from the northern valleys made it sound. You paid her a great deal of money." "I did. I want it back." He had not moved. One hand had come up to the horse's cheek and rested there without weight. 9 years. He has been standing in my stable for 9 years, and all anybody had to do was ask. "That is not all anybody had to do," Marin said. "That is only the part you can do standing up." He looked at her then, properly, and she was unhelpfully aware of the wind and her wet cuffs, and the fact that she had not eaten since morning. "Show me the rest," he said. So she showed him. She had meant to give him an hour, and sent him back to his council, and instead the light went orange over the roof of the mews, and then went altogether, and Odo brought lamps without being asked, and Marin, who had made a profession of being the quietest person in any room, stood in a lamplit stable, and talked to a king for 4 hours. "They come at him like a possession," she said at one point. "Every noblewoman. Your aunt has walked through that door, has gone straight at his head with her hand out, because somebody told her that is how you take a thing that is yours. And he is not anybody's. He has never once in his life been anybody's. Neither, I am told, have you," Casimir said. She stopped with the brush in her hand. "Master Fell says you are the best natural hand he has ever trained, and that you have refused every post he has offered you for 6 years, and that he cannot make you understand your own worth." He was watching her. He said it the way a man talks about a daughter. Marin put the brush down on the ledge and squared it with the edge, which was a thing she did with her hands when she needed a moment and did not want it noticed. "He is kind to me," she said. "That is not an answer." "No." She looked at the horse instead of at him. "You want to know why I clean floors?" "Because I know what I am. You get kept while you are useful, your majesty. A hand, a horse, a girl who is good with a difficult animal. You get fed and housed and spoken well of, right up until the day the difficulty is finished, and then you get put somewhere out of the way. And if you have been sensible, you will already be somewhere out of the way, and it will not hurt. Nobody keeps a thing because they want it, they keep it because it is still doing something." The silence went on long enough that she began to be ashamed of it. "Who told you that?" Casimir said quietly. Marin opened her mouth to say that nobody had told her. That it was simply true. That she had worked it out herself at 11 years old, and had never once been given a reason to revise it. She could not, for the life of her, work out why the sentence would not come. "It is late," she said instead. "You have a ride in the morning." He let her have it. He said goodnight, properly using her name, and went out across the dark yard toward the lit windows of a life she had spent 12 years watching from underneath, and Marin stood in the doorway and swore at herself, comprehensively in a language of the lower valleys. She stayed to put the tack away. She always stayed to put the tack away. The morning ride was ceremonial, the first of the winter, and the blanket, for it was the good one, the heavy gray with the holds mark, worked into the corner. Somebody had folded it and set it on the rail ready. Marin picked it up to shake the dust from it, and stopped. She turned it over and ran her palm across the underside, the side that lies against the animal, and about a hand's breadth from the spine, she found what her fingers had already found. Somebody had worked a blackthorn spine into the weave from beneath, not caught in it, worked in, patiently, so the point stood a 1/4 inch proud in the exact place where a rider's weight comes down. A horse takes that as a wasp. A storm-bred takes it as a wasp and puts his rider into a stone wall in front of 9,000 people. And afterwards, everybody says, quite sadly, that the animal was soured and should have been put down years ago. Marin stood alone in the lamplight with the blanket in her hands and understood, with a coldness that had nothing to do with the weather, that somebody who knew this stable very well wanted the King of Blackmerehold dead. She did the sensible thing first. That was what she told herself afterwards, on the bad nights. When she went back over it looking for the moment, she could have stopped any of it. Garrow was in the tack room at first light, with his spectacles down his nose and the winter inventory in front of him, and he looked up over the rims the way he had looked up when she was 11, and came to him with a dead sparrow in her 2 hands. "Show me," he said. She showed him. He turned the blanket under the lamp, found the thorn with his thumb exactly where she said it would be, pressed it flat and let it spring back. "Blackthorn," he said. "Off the hedge by the low paddock. That whole rail is thick with it. It was worked in from underneath, master. It was pushed through by somebody's careless hand while it dried on the wrong rail." He took his spectacles off Marin. "Girl, you have had a very strange week. You have been stood up in front of the court like a prize heifer, and every noble house from here to the coast is writing letters about it. And now you are in my tack room at first light, telling me there is an assassin in the stable." He set the blanket aside. "I have known you since you were a scrap. You see things nobody else sees. It is the best thing about you, and it will eat you alive if you let it. There is no plot. There is a hedge, and a wet blanket, and a careless boy. And if there is not, then I will find the boy and deal with him, and you will feel foolish for a week." He smiled at her, and it was a good smile, and it had been the safest thing in her world for 12 years. "Leave it with me. That is what I am." For she left it with him. She went back that night, and the blanket was gone, and the rail was empty, and when she asked, she was told it had been burned because it was damp and beginning to mold. Marin said nothing. She stood a long while in the dark, with her forehead against Hollow's neck. Then she did what she was actually good at, which was not talking, and not accusing, and not asking permission. She watched. She watched for 11 days. She counted the grooms in and out, and learned that the good gray blanket had lain on that rail since the previous evening, and that 4 men and a boy had passed it, and she kept all of it in her head, because a maid with a written list is a maid who has to explain a written list. The trouble was that watching a stable meant being in the stable, and the King of Blackmerehold had developed a habit. He came at odd hours, at the 10th bell with his collar up, or before dawn with his hair flat on one side, and sat on an upturned feed bucket outside the 3rd stall with a lap desk on his knees. "You have an office," she said the 4th time. "Nobody has ever once come into this stable to ask me for anything," said the king, without looking up. "Do you know what that is worth?" She never once made him leave. She noted the fact and disliked it, and went on not making him leave. She had begun by watching him for danger, and she held to that afterwards like a rope. He was a man who had been very nearly killed in his own yard, and had laughed about it, and men do not laugh about that, unless they already know something. The trouble with watching a man closely for 11 days is that you become very good at reading him. And then one evening you look up and understand that you stopped reading him for danger some time ago, and have simply been looking. It happened, as far as she could ever pin it down, on the 9th day, over nothing. He was reading a petition and laughing at it, and he read a line aloud in the voice of the man who had written it, and she laughed properly, with her head back, and when she brought her head down, he had stopped laughing and was watching her mouth with an expression of such open and undefended surprise that she had to turn away and be busy with the bridle. Some considerable time. After that it was very bad indeed. 4 houses have written to the Dowager, Petra reported at breakfast. They are calling it an insult to the presentation. It is an insult to the presentation. They are calling it worse. Eat. You have gone gray. The 13th day was the winter hunt, and the winter hunt was why the Ardaks had come. Marin was not invited, being a maid, and required to attend, being 13th in the line. And the resolution of these two facts was that she rode at the back on a borrowed cob with her hood up, while the noble houses went out ahead of her over the frozen upper meadow in a great glittering ribbon of horses and breath and dogs. Lady Sylvain Ardick dropped back to ride beside her before they had gone a mile, and told her, without turning her head, that her father had written to the dowager, and that she wanted her to hear it from somebody who was not enjoying it. "I did not do it for you." Her gloved hands were very still on the reins. "I have told 4 people now, and every one of them looked at me the way you are looking at me. That animal was hurt, and somebody had made him that way, and I knew it inside a second, and then he threw me into a trough and everybody laughed." Ahead of them the ribbon turned along the crest, and the king went up the rise at the head of it on a big dark horse with a white sock on the near hind, and Marin watched him go and felt her whole chest do something complicated. "I believe you," she said. Lady Sylvain turned to look at her for the first time. "Do you?" she said. And then the horn went up on the crest, and the shape of the ribbon broke, and Marin was moving before she knew why, because she had seen Hollow's tail go up and set, and she had told a king in a frozen ring that the difference between thinking and deciding is half a second. It was the ice under the snow, on the meadow, shoulder. It was that too afterwards when they picked it apart. But it was mostly the girth. She saw the saddle go over. She saw it slide, the whole of it sideways and under, the way a saddle only goes when the strap that holds it has parted, and she saw the king of Blackmere hold come out of it at the gallop onto frozen ground, with half a ton of storm-bred stallion coming down on top of him. Marin did not decide anything. She would have said so under oath. She was off the cob and running, and she reached him in the sliding chaos of it and got 2 fists in the front of his coat and hauled him bodily out from under a falling horse. She got him clear. She did not get herself clear. Hollow came down hard on the ice and scrambled, and one shod hindfoot came round and caught her across the left forearm with the full weight of an animal trying not to fall. She did not remember much of the next part. She remembered the sky being very white, and somebody shouting for a physician in a voice she did not recognize as the king's, until much later, because it had none of him in it at all. When she came up out of it, she was on her back in the snow, with her arms strapped to her chest, and somebody's coat over her, and the somebody was kneeling in the wet with his shirt sleeves in the snow, and his hands shaking so badly he could not fasten the strap on the second pass. "Your Majesty," Marin said. Her voice came out wrong. "Do not," said Casimir Vale. "Do not say anything sensible to me. Not for a moment." She looked at his hands. She had watched them sign treaties and open letters and hold a lap desk steady on a bucket, and they had never once shaken. Not when an arrow went into a post beside his head. Not when 9 noble houses sat across a table from him. Not once. They were shaking now. "You are hurt," he said, "because you pulled me out from under my own horse. I have not been able to make my hands work since, and I want you to understand that I have not felt anything like this in 9 years, and I do not have the first idea what to do with it." Marin lay in the snow and looked up at him, and the whole careful architecture of 12 years came very quietly apart in her chest. The Dowager Lady Ilva did not approve of her, which Marin had expected, and did not intend to lose to a broken arm, which she had not. "You will be at the midwinter feast," the Dowager said from the doorway of the sick room, with the manner of a woman reading out a sentence. "You will be present, you will be seated, and you will be dressed. If the houses see the king's chosen, brought in wearing an apron, they will say he is mocking them, and, if they think that we shall have a war before spring." "Yes, my lady, good." Her eyes went briefly to the strapped arm. "That was well done on the meadow. Do not repeat it. A queen who dies, pulling her husband out from under things, is no use to anybody." She was gone before Marin could work out how to answer that. Petra dressed her, because Marin had one arm and no idea, and because Petra had been waiting the whole of her adult life for exactly this. "Hold still." "I am holding still." "You are vibrating." Petra put a pin between her teeth. It is dark green, because the Arctic woman sent a note saying that whatever you wear, it must not be blue. I do not know what that means, but she was right. The great hall of Blackmere Hold at midwinter held 1,100 candles, and Marin knew that because she had counted them out of their boxes for 6 years, and carried them up in crates, and gone round afterwards with a taper and a stool. She had never once come in through the front. It was a different room from the front. The whole shape of it changed. The light sat differently. The noise came at you from the ceiling instead of the floor, and every face she had spent 6 years being invisible in front of turned to look at her at once. Casimir came the length of the hall to fetch her. He did it slowly, and he did it in front of everybody, and Marin understood, watching him come, that it was deliberate down to the last step, and that she was the only person in the room he was not performing it for. "You look," he said, and stopped. "That bad." I had a sentence. He offered her his arm the right side, away from the strapping, without being asked, and without making anything of it. "It has gone." There should have been an incident. She had braced for the incident all evening. Instead, Lady Sylvain Arctic crossed the floor in front of her own father, took Marin's good hand in both of hers, and kissed her cheek where 400 people could see it. "Say something to me," Sylvain murmured, still smiling. "And look pleased about it, because my father is watching, and this is costing me a great deal." "Why are you doing it?" "Because you believed me." She squeezed Marin's fingers hard enough to hurt. Nobody else did. Afterwards, Marin could never find the moment the room let go of her. Somewhere between the second course and the music, it simply did. Somebody's uncle asked her opinion of the northern hay, and then argued with it for 20 minutes. Odo, let in with the pages, was taken with a fit of joy so extreme he had to be removed to the passage. And at some point, past midnight, the king put his hand at the small of her back and steered her out of a door and up a stair onto the old wall, where the wind came off the mountain, and the noise of the hall dropped away to almost nothing. It was very cold. She did not mind. "You hate it," Marin said. Casimir laughed once, and it was a real one. "I am extremely good at it. Those are not the same." He put his forearms on the parapet and looked out at the black shoulder of the mountain, and for a while said nothing. And she watched the charm come off him the way it had come off him in the ring. This time, she was ready for what was underneath, and it still went through her like a blade. "I was 19, he said. "My father went out at the second bell and did not come back, and I was in that hall by the fourth, and the whole of the Ridgelands waited to find out whether I was going to be worth anything. And I discovered that if you smile and speak pleasantly, and never let them see you working, they decide you are clever. That decision is worth about 9 years. He turned his head. "There is not one person alive who has ever asked me a question I could answer honestly, and I have got so good at the smiling that I am no longer certain there is a man underneath it, or whether I wore him out." "There is," Marin said. "You cannot know that. You asked a horse for permission, and then you waited for the answer." She came and stood beside him at the parapet, close enough that their sleeves touched. "Men who are hollow do not wait." Casimir Vale looked at her for a long moment in the cold. "I am going to say something to you," he said, "and I would like you to understand that I have thought about it carefully, and that I am not being charming, all right. I did not agree to this because you dared me." His voice had gone very low. "I agreed because in 9 years you are the first person who has stood in front of me and told me the truth without first working out what it would cost you. I would like very much to keep you, and I've spent 11 days trying to say that, in a way that does not sound like the thing you told me in the stable, that you get kept while you are useful." He turned to face her. "Marin, I am not keeping you. I am asking." She had an answer ready. A whole reasonable, sensible, self-protecting answer carried about her person, for 12 years for precisely this moment, and she stood on the old wall of Blackmere Hold at midwinter and could not for the life of her recall a word of it. So she took a fistful of his shirt in her good hand, and pulled him down and kissed him. Instead, the wind came off the mountain. Below them the hall went on with its candles and its noise, and none of it had anything to do with either of them, and after a while, they went in out of the cold. It was much later and much warmer, and the fire in his outer room had gone down to red, and she was half asleep in a chair with her feet on the fender, when he asked her for the promise. "There is something I need from you," he said. He had her good hand in both of his, and was doing something absent-minded to her knuckles with his thumb. "Say yes before I ask. It will be easier for both of us." "No, you are a very difficult woman. Ask." He was quiet a moment. "The girth strap. I want you to leave it alone." Marin went still. "I know you have been counting grooms. Master Fell told me you had got an idea into your head, and I told him I had noticed, and neither of us has slept properly since." His thumb had stopped moving. "There is an investigation, and it is closer than you think, and if you go turning stones in that stable, somebody will notice you doing it. You have already put yourself under a falling horse for me, once. I am asking you not to do the rest." She looked at the red edge of the fire. Every part of her that had ever been useful to anybody said no. There was a hedge, and a burned blanket, and 4 men and a boy, and a strap that had parted clean across on a hunt where 9 noble houses were watching, and she was the only person alive with all of it in one head. "All right," she said. "I promise." She felt the whole of him let go at once. He put his forehead against her shoulder and breathed out and said something she did not quite catch and did not ask him to repeat, and she sat there in the warm dark with the fire going down and understood 2 things with perfect clarity. The first was that she had just lied to the man she was in love with. The second was that she had never in her life been any good at leaving a thing alone. She waited until his breathing changed and the room was quiet. She was careful about getting up and quieter about the door. The corridor was cold and blue, with the hour before dawn, and she was 3 steps along it when a door opened at the far end, and a man came out and stood a moment with a lamp in his hand. Master Garrow Fell had not slept, either. He was in his outdoor coat, with the frost still on the shoulders of it, coming out of a room that had no business being open at that hour. He was coming out of the king's private study. Marin stepped back into the dark of the alcove and stood with her heart going like a hammer and watched the oldest friend she had in the world lock the door behind him with a key he should not have owned and go away down the stair. And then she went and got the lamp. The lamp was where Garrow had left it, on the ledge at the turn of the stair, still warm in the glass. Marin stood outside the door of the king's private study for a long time. She had promised, 4 hours ago, in the warm dark by a dying fire, to leave a thing alone. She had promised to leave the girth alone. She had said nothing at all about the study. The door was locked. She was through it in under a minute, because a lock on an interior door is a suggestion, and because Garrow Fell had taught her how to open one when she was 12, so she could reach the medicine cupboard at night without waking him. It was a small room, with a table and a shelf of ledgers, and a dead fire, and the whole of it smelled of cold ash and paper. That was the honest part, and she went back to it afterwards, over and over. Because a person who does not know what she is looking for will find whatever has been left out for her. It was in the second drawer on top, squared to the edges. It was 6 sheets in a strong slanted hand she had watched on a lap desk for 11 days, and the first sheet was a list of noble houses, and beside each house a date, and the dates were in order, and the order was the order of the presentations. Arctic, the 4th line down. She had been 4th. Beside Arctic, in the same hand, somebody had written that the girl rode, that she would go straight in and take the head, and that the animal would not tolerate it. Marin read it twice. Then she read the rest. She was still standing there with the second sheet in her hand when the door opened behind her. Casimir did not say anything. He did not. She noticed with a terrible detached calm, look, surprised. He looked at the drawer, and then at her hand, and then at her face, and something went out of him all at once. the way a house goes dark. Tell me it is not what it looks like, Marin said. I could tell you that. Then tell me. It would not be true. He shut the door behind him. Ask me. Do not stand there deciding. You have never once been afraid to ask me a question. Do not start tonight. Did you arrange the order? Yes. All 12. All 12, Casimir said. The wind went over the roof. You knew he would hurt them, she said. I knew he would refuse them. He has refused every living soul who has walked at him for 9 years. He had not moved from the door. 9 houses wanted a marriage. 3 of them wanted a marriage badly enough to make it a war. If I said no, and there is no version of no that a house like Arctic accepts from a man they think took his father's chair too young. But there is no house in the Ridgelands that will go to war with an animal. His voice was quite steady. So I let the animals say it. 12 times in public. And every one of those fathers went home furious with a horse, instead of furious with me. And Blackmere did not burn. And I have spent 9 years learning that this is what the work actually is. And, hollow. He was silent. Say it out loud. He was useful, said the king. Marin put the sheets down on the table because her hand had begun to shake and squared them to the edge, which was the thing she did with her hands. You knew he was hurt, she said. You sat on that mounting block and watched him shake. You watched Sylvain Arctic climb out of a trough with the water running off her. And you took what he was doing and you made it a door, and you kept opening it 12 times because it kept working. Yes. And then I raked the sand and told you nobody had ever asked him a question. And you sat there and you let me. Yes. Why? Marin said. You could have told me any of this on the wall tonight. You told me things tonight I do not think you have told anybody alive. And you had this in a drawer 40 feet under my head. And you let me say I believed there was a man underneath. Why not tell me? And Casimir Vale, who had an answer ready for everything, did not have one. Because you would have gone, he said. It was almost gentle. That was the unbearable part. I did not know he was suffering when I began, he said. I want that on the record, even though it does not help me. I thought he was ruined, and I thought I was making use of a ruin. And then I stood in a ring in the cold and asked him a question. And he put his head on my chest, and I understood inside a second what I had spent 9 years doing. And by then you were already the best thing that had happened to me in my adult life, and I could not think of a single way to say it that did not end with you walking out of a door. He looked at her. So, I said nothing. And I hoped, and the hoping went on rather longer than I meant it to. Marin stood in the cold little room and heard the whole thing arrive. You get kept while you are useful. There it was, in a strong, slanted hand, in a drawer, not a suspicion, not a bitterness she had carried since she was 11 and could never quite prove, written down, dated, in order, with the notes in the margin. He had needed the horse to refuse 12 women, and the horse had refused them. He had needed one honest voice in a court full of people working out what a truth would cost. And here she was, 13th, unarranged, the only accident in the whole design. It fitted the facts. That was what finished her. Everything he had said on that wall fitted the facts perfectly well from either direction, and she would never be able to tell which. I want to be angry with you for lying, she said. I have been standing here trying to be. And you did not lie. You have not lied to me once, tonight. You have answered every single thing I asked you, straight out the moment I asked it. Marin. That is the part I cannot get past. Her voice had gone very quiet. You told me the truth because I found the drawer. If I had not come up that stair, you would have gone on hoping, and I would have gone on believing there was a man underneath, and neither of us would ever have known the difference. That is not a lie. It is worse than a lie. It is a thing you were prepared to let me live inside. He said her name again. He came off the door and he got one step, and he stopped because she had put her hand up. Do not, Marin said. You will say the right thing. You always say the right thing. It is the only skill you have ever been sure of, and I will believe it. and I cannot afford to believe you tonight." She went past him to the door. "I am glad you did it," she said with her hand on the latch. "That is the other thing I have worked out standing here. 9 houses and no war. You are probably a good king. You will be a better one than your father, and this hold will be lucky to have had you." "Please," said Casimir Vale. "But I have spent my whole life being useful to people who were fond of me while I was useful," Marin said. "And I let one man make me believe that was all there was. And tonight, I found out he was right." She opened the door, and she went down the stair, and she did not look back once. Odo was hammering on the box room door before she had been lying on the bed an hour. "Marin. Marin." His voice cracked clean down the middle. "It is hollow. Come now." She was in the yard, in her nightshirt and her boots, and did not remember taking the stairs. The stall lamp was lit. The stallion was down. He was down on his side in the straw, with his neck out, and his legs stiff and his flanks working, and he had sweated through his winter coat until he was dark with it, and every few seconds a shiver went over him from the shoulder to the hock in a way that had nothing to do with cold. "He was fine at the 10th bell," Odo was saying. "I gave him his feed. He took it. He was fine. Get the door open. Get the lamp closer. Do not touch his head." She went down in the straw on her knees. She was there perhaps 40 seconds before she knew. The pupil first blown wide and not answering to the lamp, the color inside the lip, the sweat on the neck and the flank but not on the legs. And under it all, running through the big body like current through a wire, the fine continuous tremor that is not pain and is not fever, and is the one thing a horseman in the Ridgelands learns to recognize before he learns to read. "Get the physician," Marin said. "Then get the king. The physician is with the Arctic party. They are at the Low House. It is a mile. Then get the king first. Odo, run." She had 4 physicians in the stall inside the half-hour, and it did not matter, because the physicians of Blackmere Hold treat men. She listened to them talk about fever and colic and a chill taken after the feast, and every second of it was a second she did not have. "It is grey cap," Marin said. "Dried and ground, and it will have been in something sweet, because he would never take it otherwise, and he took it about 2 hours after his evening feed. Look at his eye and stop arguing with me." "That is a hedgerow weed," said the senior of them. "I am describing the thing that killed 9 of the storm, bred in the year I was 9 years old, and I was here, and I helped carry them out." Her voice went through the stall like a bar of iron. "It does not work fast. That is the point of it. It goes quiet for a day, and then the beast is gone. 4 days later, of something that looks like anything at all. But before that, for about 6 hours, it does this." She put her hand flat on the shaking flank. "It makes them mad." Somebody in the stall said, very quietly, the word ride. "Yes," said Marin. The midwinter ceremonial ride left the hold at first light. It went down through the lower town at the walk, through 9,000 people packed on the road and on the roofs, with the king of Blackmere Hold at the head of it, alone, on the last of the stormbred. There was 1 hour of dark left. "He does not go," she said. "Somebody wake the dowager and stop the ride." "The ride cannot be stopped," said the senior physician. "Not on a maid's word about a mushroom," Casimir Vale said from the doorway. "It is stopped." They turned 9,000 people around in the dark, and the lower town went to bed furious. And by the following evening every one of them had heard why, and not one of them was furious any longer. Nobody had heard him come. He was still in yesterday's shirt. He came into the stall past all of them, and he went down in the straw on the other side of the horse's head, without any regard at all for what he was kneeling in. And he put his hand on Hollow's cheek. "Is he going to live?" he said. "I do not know. Tell me what you need." "Charcoal, all of it, and milk thistle if the herb store has any, and it will not. So, send to the Low House, because the Arctic woman's grandmother was a herbalist, and Sylvain will know where to look." And I need to know who was in this stable between the 10th bell and midnight. Why? Because whoever did it knew exactly what he was doing. Marin sat back on her heels and heard the words come out of her mouth and felt the floor of her whole life tilt. Half a hold could harm a horse. Anybody could put anything in a bucket. But you do not choose Greycap unless you know it goes quiet for a day. And you do not choose the ride unless you know what a stormbred does in a crowd. And you do not know that it makes them mad first unless you were here in the bad winter 9 years ago and watched it happen. The stall had gone very quiet. There are 4 men alive who were here that winter, she said. Casimir did not say the name. He waited, with his hand on the horse's cheek, and let her get there by herself, which was, she thought afterwards, the single kindest thing he ever did for her. He told me there was no plot, Marin said. I brought him a thorn out of a saddle blanket, and he told me there was no plot, and he burned it. They took him in the tack room at the 6th bell, and he did not run, and that was the part she was least prepared for. He was sitting at his own table with the winter inventory open and his spectacles on, and when the guards came through the door, he looked up over the rims exactly as he had looked up at her when she was 11, with a dead sparrow in her 2 hands. "Ah," he said. "Girl." "Why?" Marin said. "Because he took my line." Garrow said it as though it were the plainest thing in the world, and perhaps to him it was. 19 years. I kept the stormbred alive. And a boy of 19 came into this yard and gave the mastership of them to a man from the coast who could not tell a splint from a spaven because the coast man's brother sat on his council. He closed the inventory. I put it right. Slowly, nobody ever caught me, because there is nothing to catch, only a horse that went wrong for no reason anybody could name. You did it to Hollow. I did it to him. No heat in it at all, every day a little, for 9 years. She had known it for about 2 hours by then. Hearing him say it in his own voice at his own table did something to her chest that she did not have a word for. Garrow stood up. He had been a big man once and was still a quick one, and the guards were 3 steps away, and the door was 1, and he went for the door, and Marin was in front of it. "Move," he said. "No, girl, move." And Marin, who had never struck anybody in her life and did not intend to start, turned side on and dropped her eyes, and let out a long breath, and said, "Hollow." He came up the passage from the stall, like something falling off a mountain. He was sick and shaking and had been drinking charcoal and water for 2 hours, and he came anyway because the woman who had fed him in the bad winter had asked him a question and waited for the answer. He came through the tack room door with his ears flat to his skull and went straight past her, and he put Master Garrow fell into the corner, between the saddle horse and the wall, and stood over him with his teeth bared and his whole ruined body between that man and the door. "He has hated you for 9 years, Marin said, over the noise of it. Everybody in this hold thought he hated the world. He only ever hated one thing in it, and not one of us could read him. And I have been standing next to it since I was 11 years old. They got him out. It took 6 of them, and it took some time. And in the doorway, with the guards' hands on him, and the whole thing finished, Garrow fell, turned his head and looked at her, and he was not angry, and he was not frightened, and that was somehow the worst of all of it. He is a spoiled boy who breaks a good horse and calls it fate, he said. You know that. You have always known that. You said it yourself in the ring, girl, in front of the whole court. Marin stood in the tack room in her nightshirt and her boots, and could not speak. Where do you think you got it? Said Garrow Fell. 4 months later, on a wet green morning at the end of spring, the master of Horse of Blackmere Hold stood in the low paddock with 2 yearlings on a long rein, and a list of things she was not thinking about. The post had been the dowager's doing. Marin had refused it 3 times. On the 4th occasion, Lady Ylva had come down to the yard in person, in good shoes, in the mud, and had said that 11 horses in that hold carried storm-bred blood. Now, counting the 2 foals where the year of the poisoning there had been 4, and that if Marin wished to go on cleaning floors to prove a point, she was welcome to do it. But that the horses did not deserve it. So Marin had taken the post, and she was extremely good at it, which was a different thing from being able to bear it. Hollow lived. That was the first month. He was 4 days at the edge of it, and 11 more in a state nobody would call recovery, and she slept in the straw for the whole of it. And when he finally got his head up and took a mouthful of grass out of Odo's hand, the entire lower yard stood at the rail and wept like children. The letters started in the second month. They came 2 and 3 a week, in a strong, slanted hand, and they were never left where anybody could see them. Some were short, some ran for pages. A number of them were not about her at all, but about a pension dispute, or a posting, or whether the low road ought to be widened, written out plainly and ending with a question, as though her honest answer on a matter of hay were still worth having. She read every one. She answered none of them. She kept them, which she did not examine. One of them said he had gone back over the 9 years and found 40 places where he could have done the work honestly and had chosen the clever way instead, and that he was not going to send her the list because it was not her job to hold. One said only that sorry was a small, stupid word for what he had done, and that he did not have a bigger one, so he would go on sending the small one. And one of them, near the bottom of a page about drainage, said, I am not asking you to forgive me. I am asking you to let me be somebody you have to see. That is all. I would rather be a difficulty in your life than nothing in it. He never once used the office. That was the thing that undid her, though it took the whole 4 months. He was the king, and she was his master of horse, and there were a dozen legitimate reasons a week to send for her, and he never sent for her once. He came down to the yard and stood at the rail with the rest of them, and when she was busy, he went away again. And once she saw him from the mews window, standing at the far end of the paddock in the rain for a quarter of an hour, doing nothing at all, and then walking back up to the hall. Sylvain Argy wrote too, which was a stranger correspondence, and a better one. Her father had come round largely because his daughter had ridden home with a full account of the poisoning, and had told the coast what the horse had actually been suffering. Come for the summer, Sylvain wrote. Bring the difficult one. My father will pretend to be gracious, and it will nearly kill him, and I should like to watch. Marin was drafting a reply to that one on a wet green morning at the end of spring, sitting on the mounting block with the paper on her knee, when Odo came across the yard at a dead run for the second time in her life. He was not white this time. He was gray. Marin, he said. The king went out at the 8th bell last night. Alone, he told the gate he was riding to the winter pasture and back, and to tell nobody, and he has not come in. She was already on her feet. Which horse? That is the thing. Odo's hands were shaking. Come to the gate, please. Just come to the gate. She came to the gate. Hollow was standing in the road outside it, in the rain blown and mudded to the belly, and shivering and empty. He was still saddled. The winter pasture is 11 miles. Above Blackmere, hold on the shoulder of the mountain, and the road to it stops being a road at the 7th mile. Marin went up it in 3 hours in bad rain, with Odo behind her and 6 men strung out below on the track. She sent them to the pasture and the shepherd's ground beyond it, and did not go with them. She went to the bothy under the shoulder, because she had spent 2 seasons on that mountain as a girl, bringing feed to the high mares, and because if a man rode up here in the dark and the weather turned, there was one place he would be if he had any sense. And Casimir Vale had a great deal of sense and almost no judgment. There was smoke coming out of the roof. The door was on the latch. She got it open a hand's breadth without a sound, which was a thing she could do, and stopped. There was a fire going. Badly. There was a king of the Ridgelands sitting on the floor against the wall, with his boot off, and his ankle swollen up like a bread loaf, and standing in front of him, up to its knees in the ashes, and thoroughly unafraid, was a storm-bred foal of about 10 weeks, with a white blaze and no manners whatsoever. No, Casimir was saying to it. No. That is my hand. That has been my hand for some time now. It is not for eating, we have discussed this. The foal took his sleeve. I am aware I am not in a position to argue. He let it. He had his head back against the stone and his eyes shut. Do you know what she would say? She would say, I came at you like a possession. She said that to me in a stable in the winter, and I have thought about it perhaps 400 times since. He breathed out. I did come at you like a possession. I came at everything like that. I came at a horse like that for 9 years, and I came at 9 noble houses like that, and it worked so well that nobody ever once stopped me. And then I came at the only person who ever told me the truth exactly the same way. And I have had 4 months to sit with the fact that I would probably do it again if the alternative was losing her. And that is the thing I cannot get past. Not that I did it, that I would. The rain came over the roof. You are far too young for this conversation, said the king. Also, you are standing in my fire. And Marin, in the doorway, with her hand still on the latch, thought about a housemaid raking sand in an empty ring, saying the true thing out loud to an animal, because there was nobody else in the world to say it to, and not knowing that the one person who most needed to hear it was sitting in the dark at the other end. She pushed the door open. Casimir's head came up. She watched the whole of it go across his face at once, and there was no mask anywhere in it, and no charm, and nothing arranged. You are not real, he said. Your horse came home without you. He is a sensible animal. One of us had to be. He tried to get up, and his ankle would not have it, and he sat back down hard against the wall. Marin, how long have you been standing there? Long enough. Ah, he shut his eyes. Then I am at a considerable disadvantage, and I have no idea what to do about it, which is a new experience, and I dislike it very much. She came in and shut the door. She put wood on his terrible fire and made it a real one. She got the boot back on before the swelling closed it, which hurt him a great deal, and which he did not complain about once, and the foal ate a corner of her sleeve throughout, and neither of them said anything for a long time. I have 4 months of things to say to you, Casimir said eventually to the ceiling. I have rehearsed all of them in this hut since dark. Would you like to hear any of it? No, he agreed. It was very good though. I am sure it was. Marin sat back on her heels. That is rather the trouble with you. He laughed, and it turned into something that was not quite a laugh at the end of it. And he pressed the heel of his hand against his eyes and held it there. I am not going to ask you for anything, he said when he could. I came up here to see the foals, and I stayed because a horse put his foot in a hole, and if you carry me down this mountain, I shall go back to being a difficulty in your life, and nothing else. It is the first honest arrangement I have ever had with anybody. Marin looked at him. She thought about a drawer with 6 sheets in it, squared to the edges by a man who had wanted her to find them, and about 12 years of being told kindly by someone who loved her that she was a useful thing and should expect nothing further, and about how easy it had been to believe words that had never once been her own. She thought about a man who had made himself into an instrument at 19 because nobody had given him another way to be, and had used a suffering animal because it worked, and had then knelt in the straw in yesterday's shirt and asked whether it was going to live. She was not sure she had forgiven him, and fairly sure it was going to take years. Ask me, she said. Casimir Vale went very still. You have said a great many things to that foal, Marin said, that you have not had the nerve to say to me, so say it where it counts. Marin, you have opinions. Her voice was not steady, and she let it not be. You have delivered them to an animal in an empty room because it was safe. That is not good enough. It was not good enough when I did it, and it is not good enough now. The fire moved, the rain came over the roof. Marry me, said the king of Blackmere Hold, from the floor, with his boot off and no dignity left anywhere about him at all. I have got nothing to offer you that you did not already build yourself, and I am not certain I am a good man, and I would spend the whole of my life finding out with you if you would let me. Marin let him wait. She let him wait for 4 full seconds, which is a very long time, and she watched him bear it without once reaching for anything clever, and that in the end was the whole of it. Done, she said. And there is no unsaying it. The 13th presentation took place on the first dry morning of summer, and the whole of the Ridgelands came for it. It had not been the dowager's idea. It had been Sylvain Ardic's, in a letter of 4 lines, which pointed out that 12 women had been humiliated in front of a kingdom, and that the kingdom had never once been shown what the thing was supposed to look like. So they did it properly. They did it in the yard, not the ring with the gates open and 9,000 people on the walls and the road and all 12 houses standing at the front where everybody could see them. The horse was not asked to accept anybody. That was the change, and it was Marin's, and she had been immovable about it. She walked out alone, across the sand, side on, with her eyes down, in no particular hurry, the way a person walks who happens to be going somewhere else. She stopped, a full length short. She let out a long breath, and she waited. And in front of the whole kingdom, the last storm-bred stallion alive came and put his head on her shoulder and left it there. And every single person on that wall understood at last that they were not watching an omen. They were watching good manners.